What if the moment that broke you was never meant to destroy you, but to wake you up? There comes a point in life when everything collapses at once. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, so quietly that no one else notices while your inner world is falling apart. You smile in public. You function. You keep going. Yet inside, something feels unbearably heavy. Your plans didn't just fail. Your strength didn't just weaken. Your faith in how life should work quietly slipped through your hands. And the most frightening part isn't the pain itself. It's the question that starts echoing in your mind. Late at night, what if this is my life now? What if the happiness you were promised never comes? What if the harder you try to stay positive, the more exhausted you become? What if the part of you that's hurting the most is the part you've been ignoring for years? This is not a story about avoiding pain. This is a story about what happens when pain becomes the doorway to a kind of peace most people never find. And the ending is not what you expect. If this message resonates with you, please subscribe to Buddhism in every moment to support the channel and help us continue creating deeper, healing, and life-changing videos for you. Your support makes these stories possible. There are moments in life when nothing dramatic happens on the outside, yet everything inside you collapses. No sirens, no clear ending, no single event you can point to and say, "This is when it all went wrong." It's quieter than that. Life hurts all at once, but it does so silently. You wake up one morning and realize the weight in your chest isn't going away. The plans you once trusted no longer feel solid. The confidence you used to rely on feels distant, almost unfamiliar. You're still showing up, still functioning, still doing what needs to be done, but something essential inside you feels cracked. And the most unsettling part isn't the pain itself. It's the confusion. You don't understand why you feel this way. You've survived harder things before. You've been strong. You've pushed through. You've followed the rules. You've done what life asked of you. And yet here you are, tired in a way rest doesn't fix, heavy in a way words don't explain. This is the moment most people never talk about. The moment when life doesn't just disappoint you, it quietly rearranges you from the inside. You begin questioning things you once accepted without hesitation. Not just your goals or your relationships, but your understanding of happiness itself. You start wondering why positivity feels forced now, why motivation sounds hollow, why advice that once inspired you suddenly feels disconnected from your reality. People around you might say, "Stay strong," or "Everything happens for a reason," or "Just think positive." And you nod, because it's easier than explaining that strength is not what you're lacking. What you're lacking is clarity. Because this kind of pain doesn't come from failure alone. It comes from something deeper, the moment when the life you were building no longer aligns with who you are becoming. And that realization is terrifying. Not because you don't know what to do next, but because you're starting to sense that going back to who you were is no longer possible. This is the hidden turning point. The moment when happiness stops being something you can chase the way you used to. When positivity stops responding to effort. When the old formulas "work harder, think better, stay busy" suddenly stop working. And here is the truth most people miss. This moment is not the end of your happiness. It is the end of a false version of it. Life hurts the most when it forces you to let go of illusions you didn't even realize you were living inside. Illusions about control, about timelines, about how life should unfold if you do everything right. Pain enters not to punish you, but to interrupt a path that can no longer support your growth. Yet when you're inside this moment, it doesn't feel meaningful. It feels unfair, disorienting, lonely. You might even feel weak for struggling because on the surface, your life might still look fine. But inner pain doesn't need permission to exist. It doesn't ask whether your life looks successful or stable or acceptable by social standards. It shows up when something inside you is asking for honesty. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They try to escape this moment as quickly as possible. They distract themselves, overwork, numb, overthink, seek validation, chase another goal, attach themselves to anything that promises relief. They treat this pain as a malfunction, something to fix or suppress. But what if this moment is not a malfunction? What if it's an invitation? An invitation to stop running, to stop pretending, to stop forcing yourself to be okay when something inside you is clearly asking to be heard. To stop forcing yourself to be okay when something inside you is clearly asking to be heard. Life hurts all at once, not because it wants to break you, but because it wants your attention. This kind of pain appears when your inner world is ready to change, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. When your old coping mechanisms no longer work because they were built for a version of you that no longer exists. And that's why this moment feels so destabilizing. You are standing between who you were and who you are becoming. The mind panics here. It searches for certainty. It wants answers. It wants reassurance. It wants to know how long this will last and what it's supposed to mean. But the deeper truth is this: you are not meant to solve this moment. You are meant to enter it, to sit with it, to feel it, to stop demanding that it make sense right away. This is the moment when happiness stops being loud and external and begins its quiet transformation inward. The people who eventually find a deeper, steadier peace are not the ones who avoided moments like this. They are the ones who stayed, who listened, who allowed life to rearrange them without rushing the process. Because this pain is not asking you to become stronger in the way you've always known strength. It's asking you to become more honest, more present, more connected to yourself. And that is far more difficult and far more powerful. This moment hurts because something important is shifting beneath the surface. Something old is dissolving. Something real is beginning. You may not see it yet. You may not trust it yet. But this is where the story truly begins. Not with answers, but with awareness. At some point, usually without warning, you begin to notice something unsettling. The harder you chase happiness, the farther away it seems. You do everything you were taught to do. You set goals. You push forward. You tell yourself that once you reach the next milestone, once things finally settle, once life feels more secure, you'll be happy then. You'll breathe easier then. You'll feel whole then. But then keeps moving. Each time you arrive at what you thought was the destination, the feeling fades faster than expected. The relief is temporary. The satisfaction is thin. And before long, the mind starts searching again: another goal, another improvement, another version of yourself that feels just out of reach. This is not because you are ungrateful or broken. It's because happiness was never meant to be hunted. Modern life quietly teaches you that happiness is a reward, something you earn through effort, discipline, achievement, or becoming someone better than you are right now. And so you learn to treat happiness like a finish line, something that exists somewhere ahead of you, waiting once everything finally goes right. But this belief creates a hidden trap. When happiness is always in the future, the present becomes something you endure rather than live. You tolerate your days instead of inhabiting them. You rush through moments that could have been meaningful because you're focused on getting somewhere else. And without realizing it, you start postponing your own peace. You tell yourself, "I'll be happy when things calm down." I'll feel better when I figure this out. I'll rest once I've earned it. But life does not pause while you wait to arrive. The deeper problem is not that happiness is hard to find. It's that chasing it turns it into something it was never meant to be. When you chase happiness, you turn it into pressure, into expectation, into a condition that life must meet before you allow yourself to feel at ease. And life, by its nature, refuses to cooperate with that kind of demand. There will always be uncertainty, always unfinished business, always something unresolved. If happiness depends on life becoming smooth and predictable, then happiness will always remain fragile. This is why so many people feel exhausted instead of fulfilled. Not because they lack success, but because they are running toward an idea that keeps retreating. True happiness does not respond to pursuit. It responds to presence. It begins to reveal itself, not when you finally get what you want, but when you stop forcing life to give you something it cannot guarantee. It emerges in the moments when you stop negotiating with the future and start meeting the present honestly. This doesn't mean giving up on growth or goals. It means releasing the belief that your worth, your peace, or your joy is waiting somewhere else. It means understanding that happiness is not a destination you arrive at, it is a state that arises when resistance softens. When you stop chasing, something subtle shifts. The nervous urgency inside you quiets. The constant mental calculation relaxes. The feeling that you're always behind begins to loosen its grip. You begin to notice moments you once overlooked. Not dramatic moments, simple ones. A pause between thoughts. A breath that feels steady. A moment of clarity in the middle of an ordinary day. These moments don't announce themselves as happiness. They feel modest, almost fragile, but they are real. Happiness is quieter than we expect. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need to be proven. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or guarantees. It shows up when the mind stops sprinting ahead and the heart is allowed to rest where it is. The irony is this: the moment you stop demanding happiness from life, life begins to offer you something deeper than happiness, a sense of groundedness that doesn't collapse when things change. Chasing happiness keeps you moving. Letting go allows you to arrive. And arrival, unlike pursuit, does not exhaust you. This is where happiness begins to feel less like something you're missing and more like something you're remembering. Not an emotion you manufacture, but a natural state that surfaces when the struggle to be elsewhere finally ends. Happiness was never meant to be caught. It was meant to be uncovered right where you are, once you stop running past yourself. There is a reason pain feels heavier the longer it stays with you, and it is not because life keeps adding more weight. It's because the mind keeps leaving the only place where pain can actually be carried. The present moment. Most suffering does not come from what is happening right now. It comes from what the mind does with what is happening. It pulls the moment apart, stretches it across time, and turns a single experience into 100 imagined ones. A difficult conversation becomes a memory replayed endlessly. A mistake becomes a story about who you are. An uncertain future becomes a place your mind lives in full time. And while your body is here, breathing, surviving, moving forward, your mind is everywhere else. This is how pain multiplies. The present moment, on its own, is rarely unbearable. It may be uncomfortable. It may be sad. It may be heavy. But it is usually survivable. What makes it overwhelming is the mind's refusal to stay with it. The constant traveling backward and forward, gathering regret from the past and fear from the future, stacking them onto a moment that was never meant to carry so much. You may have noticed this paradox in your own life. Even when nothing new goes wrong, you still feel overwhelmed. Even on quiet days, the weight doesn't lift. Even when circumstances improve, the inner tension remains. That's because the pain you're carrying is no longer coming from life, it's coming from time. From living everywhere except now. The mind believes it's protecting you by replaying, predicting, and preparing. But in doing so, it creates an emotional storm that never rests. It turns memory into punishment and possibility into threat. And without realizing it, you begin living in reaction to moments that are no longer happening or may never happen at all. The present moment doesn't work this way. The present moment does not accuse you. It does not predict your failure. It does not demand answers you don't have. It simply asks you to be here. When you allow yourself to fully enter the present, even briefly, something surprising happens. The noise softens. The urgency fades. The body exhales. You realize that, in this exact moment, you are still here. Still breathing. Still capable of meeting what's in front of you. This does not erase pain. But it stops pain from spreading. Presence acts like a boundary around suffering. It contains it. It prevents it from turning into identity, destiny, or doom. It brings pain back to its original size, instead of letting it expand across your entire life. This is why people who seem to have everything can still feel empty. Their lives may be full, but their minds are never home. They are always arriving at the next thing, thinking about the next thing, worrying about losing what they have, or regretting what they didn't do differently. Presence is what reconnects you to the life that is actually happening, not the one you are afraid of or longing for. And presence is not something dramatic. It doesn't require silence retreats or perfect conditions. It begins in small, almost unnoticeable moments. A conscious breath. The sensation of your feet on the ground. The realization that right now, in this moment, you are not in danger the way your thoughts suggest. The mind resists presence because presence feels unfamiliar at first. Without constant thinking, without mental noise, there is space. And space can feel uncomfortable when you're used to tension. But that space is where peace begins to surface. When you return to the present moment, you stop adding commentary to pain. You stop turning it into a story about your worth or your future. You experience it as sensation, not judgment. As movement, not permanence. And pain, when allowed to be just pain, begins to change. It loosens. It moves. It no longer defines you. You begin to realize that presence is not about fixing life. It's about meeting life without amplifying it. About letting each moment be what it is, without dragging the past into it or demanding the future explain itself. The present moment doesn't promise happiness, but it offers something more stable: reality without distortion. And in that clarity, even pain feels lighter, not because it disappears, but because it is no longer multiplied by a mind that refuses to stay where life is actually happening. The moment you return to now, you take pain out of time, and that is where its power begins to fade. Much of what weighs you down was never meant to be carried by you. This is one of the quiet truths people rarely confront, not because it's complicated, but because it asks for honesty. An honesty that reveals how much of your emotional exhaustion comes not from your own life, but from everything you've been holding for everyone else. You may recognize this weight as a constant tension in your chest, a low-level anxiety that never fully leaves, a tiredness that feels emotional rather than physical. You do everything you can, yet something still feels off. Heavy, crowded inside. That heaviness often isn't your pain alone. It's the accumulation of expectations you absorbed without questioning. The opinions you took seriously because they came from people you cared about. The pressure to be agreeable, successful, composed, reliable. The unspoken rule that you should carry more, give more, tolerate more without complaint. Over time, these borrowed burdens settle quietly inside you. You replay words spoken years ago. You carry disappointment that wasn't yours to fix. You internalize judgments that were never truths, only reflections of someone else's fears or limitations. And because this weight didn't arrive all at once, you rarely notice when it becomes too much. You simply learn to live with it. You tell yourself it's normal to feel drained, that it's part of being responsible, part of being kind, part of being strong. You confuse emotional endurance with emotional health and self-sacrifice with virtue. But carrying what doesn't belong to you slowly disconnects you from yourself. When your inner space becomes crowded with other people's expectations, there is little room left for your own clarity. When your emotional energy is constantly spent managing reactions, moods, and responsibilities that aren't yours, your own needs become distant, almost foreign. You may still function well. You may still be admired. But inside, you feel strangely absent from your own life. This is not because you lack resilience. It's because no one can remain light while carrying weight that was never meant for their shoulders. There is a subtle but crucial difference between compassion and emotional self-sacrifice. Compassion allows you to care without losing yourself. Self-sacrifice asks you to disappear quietly in the name of harmony. Many people choose the second without realizing the cost. They say yes when their body says no. They listen endlessly while never being heard. They absorb stress, anger, and disappointment as if it were their responsibility to stabilize the emotional world around them. And then they wonder why happiness feels unreachable. The truth is, happiness cannot grow in a heart that is overcrowded. Peace requires space. Releasing emotional weight is not about becoming indifferent or cold. It's about recognizing the boundary between what you can support and what you are not meant to carry. It's about understanding that you are not responsible for regulating other people's emotions, healing their wounds, or meeting expectations that contradict your own well-being. This kind of release often feels uncomfortable at first. Guilt appears. Fear of disappointing others arises. You may worry that setting boundaries makes you selfish or unkind. But boundaries are not walls. They are clarity. They define where you end and where others begin. They protect your energy so that when you do give, you give from fullness rather than depletion. They allow you to be present without being consumed. The moment you begin setting down what isn't yours, something inside you shifts. Your breath deepens. Your mind feels less cluttered. The constant inner pressure eases, not because your life suddenly becomes simple, but because your inner world becomes more honest. You begin to realize how much of your suffering came from trying to meet expectations that were never aligned with who you truly are. How much sadness was borrowed. How much fear was learned. And with that realization comes relief. Not dramatic relief. Quiet relief. The kind that feels like finally putting down a heavy bag you forgot you were carrying. This is not abandonment of others. It is a return to yourself. When you release emotional weight that does not belong to you, you create space for something essential: your own voice, your own rhythm, your own truth. And in that space, happiness doesn't need to be forced. It becomes natural again. Because peace was never missing from your life. It was simply buried beneath weight you were never meant to hold. There is a quiet kind of suffering that comes not from what happened, but from the endless argument you keep having with it. You replay moments in your mind, wishing they had unfolded differently. You resist emotions that refuse to disappear. You hold on to the belief that life should not look like this, feel like this, or hurt like this. And every time reality fails to meet that expectation, tension tightens inside you. This tension is exhausting because it is unwinnable. Reality does not negotiate. Time does not reverse. People do not become who you hoped they would be simply because you need them to. Yet the mind keeps fighting, as if enough resistance might rewrite the past or force the present into a shape that feels safer. This inner struggle drains more energy than the original pain ever did. It turns disappointment into suffering, change into chaos, loss into identity. Acceptance is often misunderstood here. Many people hear the word and think it means giving up, settling, allowing injustice, weakness disguised as peace. But acceptance is none of those things. It is not approval. It is not passivity. It is not resignation. Acceptance is the moment you stop bleeding from a wound that no longer exists. It is the decision to stop arguing with what has already happened and begin responding to what is actually possible now. It is the shift from emotional resistance to emotional intelligence. When you accept something, you remove its power to control your inner world. You stop feeding it with we, me, if only, and this shouldn't be. You stop adding layers of story, judgment, and self-blame to an experience that was already difficult enough. Acceptance does not make pain disappear. It makes pain honest. And honest pain is far easier to carry than imagined suffering. There is a strange calm that arrives when you finally allow reality to be what it is. Not because you like it, but because you stop fighting it. Your mind softens. Your body releases tension it didn't realize it was holding. Your thoughts become clearer, less reactive, less desperate for answers that don't exist yet. From this calm, something important becomes possible. Choice. When you are resisting reality, you have no choices. You are locked in a mental battle with the past or an imagined future. But when you accept what is, you regain access to your agency. You begin to see what you can influence and what you must release. You stop wasting energy on the impossible and redirect it toward what is alive and available now. Acceptance is the doorway to change, not its opposite. You cannot change what you refuse to see clearly. You cannot move forward while dragging a version of reality that no longer exists. Acceptance clears the fog so you can walk with intention instead of reaction. This is why people who accept reality often appear stronger, not weaker. They are not unshaken because life is easy for them. They are unshaken because they stop demanding that life be different in order for them to be okay. They bend without breaking. They adapt without losing themselves. They move with life instead of against it. Acceptance does not harden you. It frees you. It frees you from the constant internal debate that keeps you stuck. It frees you from the belief that peace requires perfect circumstances. It frees you from the illusion that control equals safety. And perhaps most importantly, acceptance allows compassion to enter toward yourself. You stop criticizing yourself for feeling what you feel. You stop judging your healing timeline. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly you can get over something that mattered to you. You allow yourself to be human without turning that humanity into failure. This is where inner freedom begins. Not when everything makes sense. Not when pain disappears. But when you stop fighting the truth of your own experience. Acceptance is not the end of the journey. It is the moment the journey becomes real. Because once you stop resisting life, life stops feeling like an enemy. And in that shift, quiet, subtle, but profound, you reclaim your power, your clarity, and your peace. There is a silent force shaping your inner world every single day, often without your permission. It speaks in your own voice. It sounds convincing. And most of the time, you don't even question it. Your thoughts, a single thought, can change how you feel about yourself in seconds. One sentence in your mind can turn a neutral moment into anxiety, a small mistake into shame, an uncertain situation into fear. And because these thoughts arise automatically, you begin to treat them as facts, rather than what they truly are: mental events passing through awareness. This is where so much hidden suffering begins. The mind is incredibly powerful, but it is not always truthful. It is conditioned by past experiences, emotional memory, fear, and habit. It reacts faster than wisdom can speak. And when you believe every thought it produces, you allow old patterns to quietly define your present life. You might notice how easily this happens. A thought appears, "I'm falling behind." Another follows, "Something is wrong with me." Soon, your body responds as if this story were real. Tension rises, confidence collapses, and without any external event, your emotional state shifts completely. Nothing actually happened, but everything feels different. This is the illusion the mind creates when thoughts go unexamined. The most damaging belief is not the negative thought itself, it's the assumption that you are the thought. That whatever appears in your mind must say something true about who you are or what your life means. But you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices them. This distinction changes everything. The moment you realize you can observe a thought instead of merging with it, a small space opens inside you. In that space, choice becomes possible. You no longer have to follow every mental story to its emotional conclusion. You can pause. You can watch. You can decide whether a thought deserves your attention or your energy. Thoughts gain power only when they are believed. A thought repeated becomes a belief. A belief repeated becomes identity. And identity shapes how you live. This is how people unknowingly build inner prisons. They replay the same interpretations for years about failure, unworthiness, fear, or loss until those interpretations feel permanent. But permanence is an illusion created by repetition, not truth. When you begin to notice your thoughts instead of absorbing them, the spell weakens. You see how often the mind exaggerates danger, predicts worst-case scenarios, and speaks in absolutes. You recognize how quickly it turns uncertainty into catastrophe and discomfort into threat. This isn't because the mind is cruel. It's because it's trying to protect you using outdated strategies. But protection through fear creates more harm than safety. Observing your thoughts does not mean suppressing them or replacing them with forced positivity. It means letting them pass without feeding them, without arguing, without following, without making them your identity. A thought is just a sentence. It is not a command. It is not a prophecy. When a painful thought arises, and you allow it to move through awareness without resistance, something unexpected happens. It loses strength. It no longer demands an emotional reaction. It no longer controls your mood. It becomes background noise rather than authority. This is how the mind begins to calm, not by silencing thoughts, but by changing your relationship with them. As this awareness grows, your emotional life becomes steadier. You stop reacting impulsively to every inner narrative. You respond with clarity instead of panic. You recognize that most distress comes not from the moment itself, but from the story told about the moment. And in that recognition, peace becomes accessible. You realize you don't need to fight your mind. You need to understand it. You need to stop handing it the power to define your worth, your future, or your happiness without question. Freedom begins when you learn to observe rather than absorb. When you stop believing every thought, the mind stops running your life. And in that quiet shift, something profound emerges, a sense of inner stability that does not depend on circumstances, outcomes, or mental perfection. Your thoughts are powerful, but they are not you. And when you truly understand that, you reclaim the space where peace can finally take root. There is an invisible environment you live in every single day, and most people never learn how to protect it. It is not your schedule. It is not your finances. It is not even your circumstances. It is your emotional energy. Your emotional energy is the inner climate that shapes how you experience everything. When it is calm, life feels manageable even when it is difficult. When it is depleted, Even small challenges feel overwhelming. The same situation can feel radically different, depending on the state of this inner climate. Yet in a loud, demanding world, emotional energy is constantly under attack. You are expected to be available, responsive, understanding, patient, strong. You absorb the stress of others because you don't want to seem cold. You listen, explain, reassure, and adapt often without realizing how much of yourself you are giving away in the process. And slowly, quietly, your inner reserves begin to drain. This depletion doesn't always announce itself as burnout. Sometimes it appears as irritability, sometimes as numbness, sometimes as a constant sense of pressure that never fully lifts. You may feel less patient, less motivated, less connected to yourself. You start reacting instead of responding. You feel tired even after rest. This is not weakness. It is unprotected energy. Many people confuse kindness with self-erasure. They believe that to be compassionate, they must always be accessible. That to be good, they must tolerate emotional environments that disturb their peace. That setting limits makes them selfish or difficult. But protecting your emotional energy is not selfish. It is intelligent. You cannot think clearly when your inner climate is chaotic. You cannot be present when your energy is scattered. You cannot remain positive when your emotional system is constantly overloaded. In a world designed to pull your attention outward to noise, conflict, comparison, and urgency, protecting your energy becomes an act of survival. This protection does not require isolation. It requires discernment. Not every conversation deserves your emotional investment. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every demand deserves your immediate yes. Your energy weakens each time you override your inner signals to meet external expectations. Each time you stay in spaces that drain you out of obligation. Each time you silence your needs to keep others comfortable. Over time, this creates a deep disconnection. You lose touch with what nourishes you, what restores you, what keeps you grounded. You begin living reactively, pulled by circumstances instead of guided by intention. Protecting your emotional energy means learning to pause before reacting. It means noticing when your body tightens, when your breath shortens, when your mind becomes overstimulated. These are signals, not inconveniences. It also means allowing yourself moments of quiet without guilt. Silence is not emptiness, it is restoration. Stepping back from constant input gives your nervous system space to reset. In that space, clarity returns. You begin to hear your own thoughts again instead of the echo of the world's demands. Protection also means choosing your environments carefully. Some spaces nourish you without effort. Others drain you no matter how much you try. This is not about blame, it is about awareness. Your peace is not meant to survive constant disturbance. When you start honoring your energy, something shifts. You become less reactive, more grounded. You stop giving temporary situations permanent control over your inner world. You begin responding from stability rather than exhaustion. This doesn't make you distant. It makes you present. Because when your energy is protected, your words carry more truth. Your actions align more closely with who you are. Your kindness becomes genuine instead of forced. Your positivity becomes natural instead of performative. The world will always be loud. It will always demand attention, reaction, and emotional labor. But you do not need to give everything access to your inner climate. Your emotional energy is one of your most valuable resources. It shapes your peace more than any external achievement ever could. When you learn to protect it, happiness stops feeling fragile. It becomes grounded, resilient, and quietly powerful. Because peace is not something you find in the world. It is something you protect within yourself. Pain becomes unbearable not because it arrives, but because of how desperately you try to make it leave. The moment discomfort appears, the mind tightens. It searches for escape routes. It judges the feeling, labels it wrong, and begins negotiating with reality. You tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way, that you've felt enough already, that this emotion needs to disappear so you can move on. And yet, the harder you resist pain, the more it stays. This is one of the most difficult truths to accept. Pain does not control you. Resistance does. Pain, on its own, is a natural human experience. It rises, peaks, and falls like a wave. But when you fight it, when you tense against it, analyze it endlessly, or demand it stop, you trap yourself inside it. You turn a temporary experience into a prolonged struggle. The mind believes resistance is protection. It thinks that if it pushes hard enough, the feeling will go away faster. But emotions do not respond to force. They respond to allowance. When you stop resisting pain, you are not giving up. You are changing strategy. You are allowing the emotion to be what it is without turning it into an enemy. You are letting it move through your body without attaching meaning to it. You are choosing to feel rather than fight. And this choice changes everything. Pain thrives on tension. It feeds on judgment. It grows louder when it is denied. But when you stop resisting, when you soften, instead of stiffen, the pain loses its grip. Not because it disappears instantly, but because it is no longer amplified by fear. You begin to notice something unexpected. The sensation you were afraid of is not as solid as it seemed. It shifts. It changes. It has movement. It does not stay at its peak forever. This is the moment when pain stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like information. Every emotion carries a message. Sadness asks for rest or reflection. Anger points to crossed boundaries. Fear signals uncertainty that needs patience, not panic. When you resist these emotions, you miss what they are trying to show you. When you allow them, understanding begins to emerge. Allowing pain does not mean indulging it or identifying with it. It means creating space around it so it can breathe and eventually pass. The body knows how to process emotion naturally. But the mind interrupts this process with resistance. When you stop interfering, the body completes what it started. The emotion runs its course. The intensity fades. The nervous system settles. This is how pain transforms. Not through control, not through force, but through presence. When you allow pain without resistance, you reclaim power. You stop being afraid of your own inner world. You realize that no emotion, no matter how intense, can destroy you if you don't fight it. This understanding creates emotional resilience. You stop fearing discomfort. You stop panicking when sadness returns. You stop treating difficult emotions as signs of failure. You begin to trust yourself. You trust that you can feel deeply without drowning. That you can experience pain without becoming it. That you can sit with discomfort and still remain whole. This trust is what loosens pain's control. Because pain only dominates when you believe it shouldn't exist. When you accept its presence, without surrendering your identity to it, pain becomes temporary again, what it was always meant to be. When you stop resisting pain, you stop being at war with yourself. And in that inner ceasefire, something gentle but powerful begins to take shape. Peace. Not because life stopped hurting, but because you stopped fighting the part of yourself that was asking to be felt. There comes a quiet turning point in healing, when you realize that happiness is not rebuilt by force, but by softening your grip on how life is supposed to look. This is where gratitude, detachment, and inner healing begin to work together, not as techniques, but as a way of seeing. Gratitude is often misunderstood. Many people think it asks you to deny pain, to pretend everything is fine, to be thankful for suffering as if it were a gift. That misunderstanding keeps gratitude shallow and inaccessible, especially when life hurts. But real gratitude does not ask you to lie to yourself. It asks you to widen your vision. Pain narrows attention. It pulls focus toward what is missing, what was lost, what failed, what went wrong. And when the mind stays locked there, it becomes blind to everything else that is still quietly supporting you. Gratitude is the act of gently restoring that balance. Not by erasing pain, but by allowing other truths to exist alongside it. Even in hardship, something remains steady. Your breath continues. Your body carries you forward. You are still capable of learning, adjusting, and choosing again. These are not small things. They are signs of life moving through you despite everything. When gratitude enters pain, it does not remove the ache, but it creates space around it. Space to breathe. Space to endure. Space to remember that pain is not the whole story. This shift in perspective changes how you relate to suffering. You stop drowning in it. You begin standing beside it. Detachment deepens this freedom. Detachment is not indifference. It is not emotional distance. It is the wisdom of not tying your inner stability to things that are constantly changing. People change. Circumstances shift. Emotions rise and fall. When your happiness is attached to these moving parts, peace becomes fragile. Detachment teaches you to hold life with openness rather than fear, to care deeply without gripping tightly, to love without losing your center. Much suffering comes from attachment to expectations how people should behave, how quickly healing should happen, how life should reward effort. When reality fails to meet those expectations, disappointment feels personal. Detachment loosens this tension. It allows reality to be what it is without turning it into a verdict on your worth or future. As attachment softens, inner healing becomes possible. Healing is not fixing what is broken. It is listening to what has been ignored. It is turning inward with curiosity rather than judgment. It is allowing old emotions to surface so they can finally complete their movement instead of remaining trapped beneath the surface. When you stop running from yourself, something surprising happens. The emotions you feared begin to lose their power. They become messages instead of threats, guides instead of enemies. Healing moves slowly because it is layered. You do not heal all at once. You heal in moments when you choose understanding over self-criticism, when you allow sadness without shame, when you forgive yourself for surviving the best way you knew how. Gratitude grounds you. Detachment frees you. Healing reconnects you. Together, they create a deeper form of happiness, one that does not depend on perfect conditions. This happiness is quieter, steadier, and more resilient. It does not collapse when life becomes uncertain. It does not disappear when pain returns. It grows from the inside. You begin to notice that peace no longer feels like something you have to earn. It feels like something you uncover when you stop demanding that life be different before you allow yourself to be at ease. This is the kind of happiness that endures. Not because suffering ends, but because you no longer abandon yourself when suffering appears. And in that loyalty to your inner world, healing continues gently, honestly, and deeply. Life does not usually hurt us in obvious, dramatic ways. More often, it wears us down quietly. It tests us through uncertainty, disappointment, emotional exhaustion, and the slow realization that the old ways we chased happiness no longer work. Throughout this journey, one truth becomes clear. Suffering is not what destroys us, our relationship with it does. This story has never been about avoiding pain or pretending to be positive when life feels heavy. It is about understanding how happiness and peace are formed from the inside, especially during moments when life hurts the most. We saw how chasing happiness turns it into pressure, how living in the past and future multiplies pain, and how carrying emotional weight that doesn't belong to us slowly disconnects us from ourselves. We learned that resistance keeps suffering alive, while acceptance opens the door to clarity. We discovered that thoughts are powerful but not facts, that emotional energy must be protected, and that pain loses its grip the moment we stop fighting it. We explored how gratitude widens perspective, how detachment creates freedom, and how healing begins when we stop running from our inner world. The deeper message woven through every part of this journey is simple, but transformative. Peace is not something life gives you when conditions improve. Peace is something you cultivate by how you meet life as it is. When you stop demanding that life be easy, you become stronger. When you stop believing every thought, your mind becomes calmer. When you stop absorbing emotions that are not yours, your heart becomes lighter. When you stop resisting pain, pain becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. And when you stop chasing happiness, happiness quietly reveals itself in moments of presence, honesty, and self-respect. The most powerful lesson from this story is this: happiness is not the absence of pain, but the presence of awareness. You do not need to wait for life to stop hurting to be at peace. You need to build a relationship with yourself that remains steady even when life feels uncertain. That means practicing presence when your mind wanders, setting boundaries when your energy is drained, observing your thoughts without obeying them, allowing emotions to move without judgment, and choosing compassion toward yourself instead of criticism. To apply this in daily life, start small. Pause when you feel overwhelmed and return to the present moment. Notice when you are carrying emotional weight that isn't yours and gently set it down. Question thoughts that create fear or self-doubt. Protect your emotional energy by limiting what you allow into your inner world. Practice gratitude not to erase pain, but to balance perspective. And most importantly, allow yourself to heal at your own pace without forcing change. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Which part of this message resonated with you the most? How do you personally stay happy and positive when life hurts the most? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments so others can learn from your perspective. If this message brought you clarity, comfort, or insight, please subscribe to Buddhism in every moment to support the channel and help us continue creating deeper, meaningful content for you. Your support gives us the motivation to keep sharing wisdom that heals, grounds, and inspires.